Okay, you're good.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order for the February meeting of the Charter School. We'll start with roll call. I will start with Stanley Lockman.
Eleanor Magny, Leah Robinson, Sophie, Maggie, we got Maggie, and we got Tiffany. If you want to.
All right, this is pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The mission of ECS is to educate each student to high academic standards using innovative curricula that will foster knowledge, love, and respect for the environment and preserve for future generations who grow citizens. Our vision is that every ECS graduate will be an actively engaged citizen driving thoughtful change in the world around them. We're going to start this meeting with an executive session. So I'm just going to ask for a vote to enter into executive session by motion. So moved. Second. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, we'll move into executive session for maybe approximately 1 hour, and the public portion of the meeting will resume after that.
It's supposed to be muted. All right, all set.
Welcome back, everybody. I will, back in session, I will, pass it over to Patrick for editorial.
Thank you, Stan. Two things. I want to first just acknowledge that, as I mentioned, we have a new director of communication, Kristen Mazer, joined us last week. We're very excited to have her here with us. We get a chance to meet her either today or at some point soon, hopefully. But we're really thrilled to have her. She's just starting and getting connected. Already having fun.
That's hilarious.
Can I get that?
Yeah, it should be.
And then it came in line with what the RKO grants we were already asking for in there and our 612 mission. And so we were able to create this cohort learning experience where we have people in the teaching profession, both from high school, middle school, administrators, people on our family engagement side, people who work with our biking programs as well, and our unique programs, and bring them all together into the same place. And each one of them was chosen because they have a unique perspective of our school and how we meet our mission. And so tonight we're going to share a little bit about what we learned from them and how that informed our next steps moving forward. So if we hop in, we can talk a little bit about the goals of the trip.
We entered the trip with some strategic inquiry areas. We really wanted to approach it with some curious questions to model how we do teaching and learning at our school is through this inquiry process. And so our three strategic areas were program alignment, school design conditions, and leadership capacity. Our aim was not to replicate models, but to understand the conditions for success that those innovative schools had, but then also how to sustain rigor and mission over time.
Yeah, so we were asking questions while we were there, like how do schools align 612 programming? How do space and systems reinforce rigor? How does shared language strengthen decision-making? And really those were questions that we not only asked of the people that we were visiting with and the schools that we were seeing, but each other as we were in those reflection moments when we came back together at the end of the day.
This is our dossier of schools. We intentionally selected these schools that would help stretch our thinking about the governance models, the design principles and philosophies, as well as the urban context. So there were charter schools, independent schools, public charter schools, as well as public schools. And so rather than, and again, I know we're repeating ourselves here, but we did not want to go and copy a model of what we saw. We framed each visit with how might be questions. We wanted to really think about transferable insights.
Yes, yeah, so if you think about Evolve Academy is actually a school that is it's an alternative school model. So it's for students who were not successful in a traditional public setting. So we didn't want to say, how can we replicate and become a school like Evolve, but it's more about what are they doing to increase rigor and project-based learning to students that we could model in our own school and take some learning from them. So rather than just that copy-paste, it's really thinking about what were those systems and structures of success that might be helpful for us.
So the homework that we referenced, all we can talk about because he was our.
So, our case for rigor in learning, and so myself and Vicky pushed for rigor in our own process here. And we had a structured set of observation tools as we went. Everybody had bookmarks, and we had a large hyperdoc that was made to capture artifacts and insights, and any emerging generalizations, we'll talk more about those, that we realized in real time as we were going. And we had moments in time where we stopped and had conversations amongst one another to better pick up what inspirations we were getting that would help us in the synthesis of this this space. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit, if you want me to jump, talk a little bit about the generalizations, and we're not going to read all of these generalizations to you because this is a snippet of what we've gathered so far and what people have reflected on, but we want to talk about how they kind of shape our thinking and the discussions that we've had.
Yeah, and one of the things that we saw, I'll reference Evolve again, because that's the one we just talked about earlier, but one of the things that we saw when we spoke to not only teachers and their administrators, that we had a student panel and the students were able to share with us what they felt like was something that was really successful, not only did we hear from them this idea of we, right, so our students, the teachers, the administrators, all use that term when we're talking about evolve. We do this, we do that. So we're able to pick up on some of these things, and how do we create that collective mindset in our students and staff. And then they also said something really powerful, which is relationships matter, but it's not about a teacher who cares so deeply about me that they're going to do whatever they want to. But they care deeply, so deeply about me, that they're creating lessons for me each and every day, and I can tell the students more. I can tell that my teachers are spending time creating things for me where I can learn and be myself. And so that was really powerful for us as educators. I know Dave is going to talk a little bit more about some of his, the reflections that we had to. But this idea is it's a school that we can take something from us, even if we don't want to be exactly like that. And I did hear some robust conversations from that, exactly. It wasn't just about, so how can we unpack what their culture is. Because often when you hear culture, people are like, we need to build relationships with our students, but I love the name, big takeaway there, and that for educators out here, relationships can also be through content and rigor and other things that teachers bring. And so that last, to give kind of put it all together, that last generalization there is that culture emerges from also the teams and the spaces and the systems we build, not just with the friendships or relationships that you might think is what relationship is. Relationship. So just so you know.
Oh, that's right, you do have to put the I, the course that on that part, so go ahead.
The Boston Breeding Academy is the top right there. We have been talking about them, they come to our school, we've been doing back and forth with them. And Vicki had been joking this whole many years now that they're like our sister school. And so at the end of our visit, their version of superintendent and I stood up together and actually shook hands and became precious sisters.
I'm sorry, I stole your thunder, we went out there, so I did, say, you know, it was an official handshake, and so it's, you know, it's official. It's official, we're a sister school, did we get a board approval? No, but we wanted to also have a directly hear from our teachers, and so some of you will probably already know Dave's Day Hour, but I do want to take this moment to also talk about Dave's Day Hour and how important he is to ECS. And he's been championing innovation at ECS for years. Started out as a science teacher and then piloted robotics, and now it's a full-fledged program. We've been to World, how many times?
4 times.
4 times. Also has been part of our environmental citizenship program, but also expanding our environmental citizenship program to integrate. So this year we integrated more ag tech with our students, which is also grant funded, and has been supporting shaping the vision for EcoForge. So if you remember, we had proposed to the board this EcoForge makerspace woodworking space, and we don't have a facility, but that doesn't mean that's stopping us. Because we also understand that, you know, the mindsets, the vision, piloting these things are really important. So actually, Dave's been also piloting woodworking with our students. And so just to circle back to Boston reinforced with us something really important, that strong programs are not just driven by the space and the facility, but driven by a vision and structure first. And Dave is going to share his reflections about that as well, because he was able to have a lot of takeaways from the teacher points.
Yeah, thanks, Vicki. I'm grateful that I had this uniquely valuable experience to observe, reflect, and learn from a lot of the schools that are there. So over the past 5 years or so, I've built up our middle school robotics and makerspace programming in a classroom teacher capacity, which has been a really great way to do that with consistency and access. You know, every student has a quarter-long task in 6th, 7th, 8th grade. So that has been great, but it's also been really difficult to scale something like that. So as students have learned what sorts of techniques and tools and things are available to them, they'll come back. Like just today, that looked like a student from music class was putting together a guitar who came in during his music class to use the soldering iron and introduce some components on there. Or earlier this year, a student won a science project and they wanted to use a robot in their science project, so they'd come in and find time during that craft or during another class to like get materials and ask for help, or with our citizenship class. capstone projects, students will try to like use resources. So all of that is just kind of like piled onto the class time, that we're doing. So when we with Boston, one of the things I was interested in seeing was, how do other schools navigate their makerspaces and access to these things, especially as we're thinking about combining our middle school and high school into a shared space. We certainly can't do it quite like we are now. And saw some great examples of, again, not something that you can necessarily take and apply, but like mindsets and philosophies. Beaver Country Day School was one of our visits in particular that I resonated with. It seemed like something that is pretty accessible to a model like we're looking to grow into. And it kind of starts with the understanding that design happens everywhere, whether that's like intentional at the forefront, or whether that's just something unintentionally in the background. But in all of your classes, students are creating these artifacts of their learning and doing things, and they're designing those things. But sometimes you don't get to highlight that aspect or let a student lean into it. So in their model, they really use the term upscaling. That's their term for how they talk about teachers having to do their courses out there. But upscaling is the word that they use when they talk to their other teachers about inviting them to the makerspace to partner with projects that these other classes are doing. And so there is some programming that happens directly out of their makerspace, but much of what they're doing is with other teachers in their classes. They have a great system in place for teachers to reach out and say, I have either a well-formed idea or no idea how I want to do this, but here's how I want to connect. And then their makerspace team can look at some of those options, make connections, and resource a project like that. And so it lets students incorporate that into all of the other design aspects that we're doing in those spaces. So again, they've created a system and a mindset. We asked them kind of candidly, how is this perceived when you're telling us this? And they've seen a lot of growth in that. Certainly you have some teachers who don't really know how to access these resources, but more and more teachers who do, and also a lot of teachers who actually split between being a science teacher and one of their makerspace teachers. They have figured out how to divide some of their workloads so that they can be in both departments. And seeing that helps, you have a connection to teacher who can split some of these roles. So something I think could look a lot of different ways, but setting up some of those systems and structures for teachers to take advantage of that space. And then, of course, having a space that's outfitted in a way that you might be able to have some students do 3D printing, others in the wood shop, and having created that space. That's my takeaway.
Thanks. And I think what was really nice for me when we were there together, so Beaver Country Day School is an independent school, and so it's tuition-based. And so Dave, when we were kids there, they worked at their makerspace. It was well, you can tell. It was a very funded space. And he did not walk away saying you can do that. I actually heard you whisper. You were right next to me, and you're like, we can go. And that was a huge moment to see that it's not about the stuff. It's about the structure we put in place, the mindsets. And that's why this cohort was just really pushing for a lot of that reflection. And so if you look, on Friday we had so Mandy and Rachel and Peter, who could not be here tonight, they facilitated a reflection and a debriefing with the group, and really talked about the conditions for success. And so as we're now designing for the future of ECS, one of the themes that really stood out so we did like this huge murder map of everybody's insights, and then we synthesized into these conditions for success and a lot of big takeaways. And so one of the things that stood out is that sustainable innovation is not defined by the program or stuff itself, but the alignment between the mindsets, the relationships, and the structures. They talked about some of the examples that he saw, but those are the underlying conditions that determine whether strong ideas will actually last. And that lens is helping us design for more durability, not novelty. Because oftentimes innovation can be the shiny new stuff, So to us at ECS, it's the underlying conditions for success that we need to build for the system.
Yeah, so I think the value here is not just in the fact that we might install some really beautiful spaces, some like great programming, but it's how we take this work and actualize it and learn with it. And we also, another outcome of this really was starting to build that middle school and high school team. So we had a lot of teachers though that are now going to have that collegial interaction that they might not have had before. There's a lot of laughter shared, so I think that's to get together. So although we did a lot of reflecting and thinking and homework and rigor, we also did have some fun. So our next steps really are thinking about how do we take what we learn and really think about building design for architects and our design team, and we think about how we can take that forward, not just for the space, but also the program, and really thinking about continued partnerships with some of the places that we went and some of the people that we met. How can we not only the partnerships that are inside ECS, but also continue the partnerships outside. And really thinking about what we need to do next to make sure that we have a space that's worthy for our educators and our students. That's Boston in a nutshell.
I'm just gonna say from a, working in design and construction at CMU, we build lots of big buildings. And this is exactly what we want our academics to do before we start designing a space. It's like, what is your culture? What are your goals? What are you trying to do? And then instead of just saying, I want Xbox here, I want this piece of equipment, it's important to know how those things can support that. But your design team will be able to really help you think through what the spaces need to get what you want. And that's so valuable when they don't come with that. You often wind up with, a lot of redesign, a lot of, wait, how's that gonna work? And, so this is like, oh God, I wish everybody did the design process, because often it's just like, I saw this, or this is what a school should have, or a classroom, or an office space, rather than what are we trying to do in this, and therefore then what should the building be designed, to reflect that.
Yeah, and we're hoping that with the reflection piece that we did with the group, too, we have essentially a small group that can then take that type of thinking to their own groups. So if there are different groups moving forward in design, they will set up on elements. So we'll have different people in different places so that they can push the thinking too, so that we don't have people saying, I want a club, 3 feet.
I mean, it's super important too, because you don't want to really use the room, but the basis is, this, but it's not gelled before you start designing, you wind up spending money on things that don't work, and, so it is, I love it.
People often want things or think they want things, but they don't actually want them. So,
I think we've also learned, we've learned from our mistakes and some, news, and so, Dr. Robbins and also knows this, but, we sometimes want something, but then don't set up conditions for it, and then it's underutilized or, overutilized, which is oftentimes what we see as well. And so, there was one that was form and function, it's tricky business, but it's also design and beauty is, something really important to us, but also efficiency and use is also important. So how do we balance form and function? Yes. So these are going to be important things to move into these conversations and have that tension.
Well, I have a question that was taking us away from maybe the design aspect, space design aspect, and more just to the kind of the culture structures aspect. Was there anything in particular that you saw, the group saw that stood out as something that UCS is doing really well, like best in class, compared to something that other schools are doing to visit?
I did. Even when I reflected on some of my own the spaces and the resources, I would often feel very grateful of the opportunities that we have, and the support that I've had behind a lot of the programming and materials and things. And even the way I am doing as like a classroom teacher, though it doesn't scale well in some ways, it does show a priority that we're giving to some of these things, and I think that comes through when you look at some of our student skills and competencies and like how they're getting these things in those spaces. I could tell that like the way we're doing some of this program is, it's like you can see what you value by how you incorporate it in your schedule, versus how it may be only added on for some students or available in some spaces in these other schools that we were at. So yeah, I do think the way that we are kind of keeping this level of innovation and access to things as a primary part of students' experiences is pretty special to ECS.
Can I add on to that?
Sure, yeah.
So Nick Tudelo, our middle school principal, I can share this around Boston Green Academy specifically. I think in their middle school, they have some challenges of the integration across all the content areas for the environmental work. And so Nick's takeaway was having it be a foundational course at middle school was a good move for us, so that it was that foundation and that everybody had access to it. And then UView, which is not listed on here, was a school that Alvin and I are partnering with to support some makerspace curriculum and design elements. It's based out of Cambridge. It's a really unique school. They are experts in design. They are a high school to support curriculum across K through 12. What really stood out to them was that we have robotics, a required course of robotics and design, thinking, and remix in 6th and 7th grade, so that we are able to increase access. So they thought that was a standout from us because most schools is elective based, and then that's why we have it's not as accessible for all students. And so now we have a more inclusive program because of that foundation, and then they also talk about 9th grade as kind of a foundational time to think about required courses, so the global citizenship course has now the potential to be that foundational course so that everyone has access to these things.
Yeah, and also,
Yes.
Laura Grant came with us, and she just was feeling very happy that we had heard our program. So Boston Green Academy is trying to get students on bikes, they just can't figure it out. So she was able to go and provide some support to them next. And even Boston Green Academy has this outdoor space that they are having a hard time actualizing in the city. So their garden is in a container, and only certain students can actually garden. For the freight hall, the freight barn only has so many kids in the freight barn. And they have outdoor raised bed gardens that they don't use infrastructure in place in order to get students in there, so they have outside programs that actually take care of those for them, so they do able to pull that. Yeah, we're not just learning, we also.
Yeah, that's also like, what do you want to keep, right? What do you want to do next?
Yeah, it's just real one of the things that they wanted to mentor as well. One of the things that I did love too was we went to 3 schools that were really trying to think of progressive forms of education. So Beaver Creek and Boston Green Academy, we went to Cleaver, Everyday School, and Vicki and I went to the last one called Tommy Brown, which was also it's not on that list, but it's also an environmental school as part, correct? Yeah, and so in going there, we were talking a lot about how kids show their learning, and one of the things that they do as well as we do is some sort of tactile project that is connected to the sustainable development goals or some sort of green focus. And it was great to see that, like in PGA, Boston Green Academy, they were doing it with their high school kids, and we were trying to find out how to start it with their middle schoolers. And we were already at a point where our middle schoolers had the traction, and we are just trying to figure out how to continue to grow them. And I'm lucky enough to run into those kids constantly in their life. And so, like, as our global citizenship
program is standing there. We, as we continue to build and build it, through report on the kids, there are opportunities for us to think about what common ground had, which was, it was like the dissertation that the kids did, the defensive learning that the kids did, to give them educational power back to the kids and that agency back to them. So it's really cool that we get to do those things. I mean, also Dave and I have these moments in the bigger spaces where we kind of look at each other and look at the tool and we're like, they definitely don't use that. So how much do you use this? And they're like, yeah, we put a lot of money in there.
Yeah.
And our need to be scrappy at times in those early days bred a lot of creativity and thinking about what we put in makerspaces, which has led us to have a very functional makerspace and a very functional program for our kids. So.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great.
I was curious if any of the school community had a established program similar to ours. If they had figured out or had been able to discuss with site recommendations or how this kind of work transfers into your core academic subjects, and if so, if there were, how do they measure it? So perhaps as we scale, we'd be able to say like, this is affecting computational thinking, for example, or this is able to go into the ways in which students are understanding procedure and process in math or something like that.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I can talk about the competencies, and there's going to be a piece of this that is like the direct to like a standard that we are still trying to figure out those connections, but Evolve Academy, because of their setup, they focused on classes that were centered around project-based learning, so each class was a project. They had a school set of competencies, I think there were about 5 of them, and they were all about like the individual, like character, aptitude, what we would normally call soft skills, but maybe they're more important skills that kids learn and take out of here. And so every moment of their classes, you could see both their teachers and the administration of the school asking them to like step up in those ways and have conversations around how am I showing these competencies or where are these competencies showing up in the content work I'm doing and the conversations I'm having and the presentations I'm doing. And like one of the most beautiful things, and we sat down in a student panel, was that as the kids were leading this student panel of 2 adults, they were using these competency words as to this was a way that I grew in X, Y, or Z competency. This is a way that I showed it. Like, and we would ask questions about how has this changed your own life? And you're like, I mean, this competency is exactly the way that I talk with my parents. And so that language around the competencies and the skills that they were building over them, getting them outside, like going to be useful outside of their time here, was clear in that delivery. And I just feel like the transformative learning experiences, what they call their project-based programs, were so well integrated that the fact that they were learning math or history or law was like subject to their ability to speak on it or their ability to understand at a deeper level of one that transcends just the class. So they didn't talk much about like how it connected to standards, but the kids definitely talked about how the content was directly connected to, like, for example, also, but.
I just want to add on that. So Evolve was chosen because they do these Spring Point transformative learning experiences. And so the Spring Point is, we had 4 teachers and an associate director go get trained in this class. So they walked away, they didn't do some of these school biz, they walked away with curriculum to use in the classrooms. And last year, Elvin and I got to go to a student expo that was multiple schools that do Spring Point, TLE curriculum. And so Evolve Academy is a unique one where they do it across the board. The Spring Point is also one that can be done in electives. And so I was able to go to a session, we were both able to go to a lot of sessions, and one of the units is called Does College Make Sense? And that was, sorry, two in a row, and then another one was the Hustle Economy. And so these were electives that they did in the financial literacy class, but these students actually made, it was the first time that I understood why I was doing math. And I was able to then,
specifically was like helpful to my life.
and then they're like, and then it impacted me in math class because now it gave me an aha moment of like, oh, this is why they're making me do these algebra. person.
Instructions that show like, if I'm going to spend this much money on college, and I can expect based on my research, how much money I'm gonna make out of here. When do the two racks cross the line and I actually make more money than I spent? And these kids were talking in math terms about a life skill. So this is why I get so excited about medical. But to your exact point, to your exact question, I think that's where we saw a lot of these translations of.
And
We're getting feedback on this.
Yes,
Teachers and the parents are getting feedback on those competencies. And they essentially, their particular way that they do it is a credit recovery model. And so the students get a credit for a course if they complete one of these TLEs. And you can't only complete it if you don't.
And Spring Point in general is all about rigor and purpose, and so the rigor piece is that it's standing alone.
Right.
And so it's very content specific, so that's why it's not like sometimes PBL, as you know, in education, it can become fluff. They're very much about, it needs to be equally rigor and purpose.
It reminds me of but back in the day when we used to do the knowing to do DAs, and I was here, I don't know, maybe there's some, not going back all the way, some value in thinking about that, so that's an outcome or measure.
Yeah.
Because of this innovation and this push, we're also seeing
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
But anyway, that sounds awesome.
It's great. No, thanks.
I'll just close it. So a couple things. One, I just wanted to point out, Mandy alluded to this or maybe mentioned it directly, but our hope is that this team, which these are just representatives of the team, but this team of folks sort of filter out into our steering committee and our design work. And so they'll play a role like most immediately there, or maybe most immediately just as they're thinking about the work today, but then they'll play a role in that shaping piece. But I think as you can also hear, this is going to have probably longer term implications no matter what a building looks like and what we do in that building. There's a lot of other stuff that's come out of that. So we're very excited about that. And just want to say again, thank you for the support in making the decision back in December. And I would like to take this quick moment to put Dave on the spot. And can you just say a little bit about the robotics competition and where the team is specifically? I think you just had a competition.
We did, yeah, just last Friday. We have our last qualifier this season coming up next week, Friday, before the state championship. Maybe it's just like a touch point to the like previous conversation. I mean, I've seen a huge growth in participation in the competition club over the last 4 years, and it's like I don't think it's a coincidence that since robotics has been a class as part of the middle school that we've seen that kind of that the access and representation. I have 44 students, middle school students, who participate in the club this year, and over half of those are girls this year. And it's just a significantly more diverse group than I've had in the past. And so I think it like just speaks to the access that we're giving all students. And so students have been working since really the beginning of September, end of August, September, building a robot to play in this year's game. And so it's kind of like culminating right now. We have one team who's officially in at the state championship, another one just the way the rankings work out that I'm like confident is being invited, and then a handful of other teams that are competitive this year. And like, this year's been kind of a rebuilding year. I had a lot of just exceptional students graduate and leave us as 8th graders, 9th graders this year. But I think that even though, now it's like we're missing those particular students, in a lot of ways, like there's a little bit of a legacy, like we kind of set the tone of like, what we do. And so I have a lot of new students to the club this year, but they're already kind of like doing well and rising.
May I throw in there on this idea of like our kids matriculating out of robotics? Last year I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of them, and some of them said that they were moving on to other schools because of the robotics teams that they had their high school choices. And this year, Dave and I, and as well as Megan Newark and Jonathan Brown of the high school started a high school team. It was our first inaugural year, but with some of the funds that we had from a grant, we were able to get the equipment, get the space, get the time, and the enrichment block. We were really excited for the process. So a number of kids from our middle school team three of them joined like this new 7-person robotics team, and they're going to like their first competition, and they're getting ready. And this is like the level up from the stuff Dave does. So we've got them using like metal cutting tools, and they're wearing goggles, and they're doing a whole different game. And so we are looking forward to continuing to build this program as a pipeline of learning for our kids to stay 6th grade, getting those intros, 8th grade, seeing those successes, and 9th grade, like stepping up their game. So we have a really great opportunity, like, and process on it now.
Thank you.
It's terrific. It's all great to hear. The excitement level is such a great thing because it sort of brings that fuel to everything else that we're doing, which obviously, there's a lot of things that we need fuel kids for. So I'm happy to see that. Good question.
Thank you. Can I just say one other thing?
Yeah.
A number of updates, but I'll just, for the sake of time, keep it to one. I want to offer a huge thanks to all of the employees here at ECS. Really, everybody pitched in last week when we came back to school. Everybody pitched in while we were remote learning and flexible instruction, but particularly when we came back to school, our facilities team has done a great job getting the buildings ready. But then, of course, clouds come along on Sunday night, and you got to unload kids on Braddock Avenue, and we had teachers and paraeducators and administrators and all sorts of people out there. We were all shoveling the snow, right? As we needed to get kids here. We had people sort of helping kids on the sidewalks at all of our other schools. We had employees, we were all worried about how we were going to park and how we were going to get to school itself as employees. How would we be here? We encouraged people to walk, to carpool, to take PRT. They did that. We specifically, Michelle and I talked about whether or not we should include cycling as something that we would incentivize, and we didn't, because we were thinking about, just not wanting to risk people's health and safety. And one of our teachers who also happened to go on the trip, I ran into him like on day 2, and he had his mitts that he was using on his bicycle, and he knows that I like to ride bicycles, and was like, hey, why didn't you include bicycles? And I said, Vince, we didn't want to encourage anybody, but you get credit, we'll give you credit. But anyway, they really did pitch in all sorts of different ways, including finding alternative methods for getting to work. And really made it a successful week for our kids, and had to deal with cold buildings and water dripping from ceilings and all sorts of things. But they did a fantastic job, and I think for the kids it was a successful week. So just a big kudos for the big team effort here at ECS last week.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yep.
Much appreciated. So here, let's get public comment. We don't have anything to send up.
I don't think we have any. Is that right?
No.
And we move on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts you can share about the consent agenda? Anybody? Okay. If not, I'm going to read the resolution. Resolution 2026-02-2206, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that the consent agenda February 18th, 2026 be approved. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Resolution is adopted. Okay, moving to number 7. This is quotes, invoices, and contracts of $10,000. And then we have the least volume thing on here. I don't know if Patrick, you want to say anything about this?
Sure. So we're asking the board to approve or authorize us to enter into an agreement with the Pittsburgh Regional Transit. This agreement would allow us to provide passes to students who would not otherwise receive, to students, all students, the students who attend school districts that provide bus passes would reimburse ECS for that. And then we would provide them to the remainder of our students. We think this is a helpful exercise as it relates to making sure that students have access when we take trips on field trip or go out the door and use public transit. It's also a way for us to have a more direct relationship with PRT as it relates to the passes on a regular basis. And one of the things that's really important about this program is it will give us the ability to use the partner pass on the Ready to Ride application that's on a phone. So students who have a smartphone can use that application and will not need to use a card. They can just simply use their app. And you'll note that if there are students who, because their parents don't want them to have a phone, they don't have access, they can have a card. But a very large percentage of our students have phones. And this will help us also dealing with lost cards. Students tend not to lose their phone and more likely to lose a card. And so this will help us in that way. It comes at a reduced rate each month for us, and the financial pieces were as part of that documentation that we sent along. And I just want to thank Michelle and Tanya for their work on this. If you authorize us to do this, we've already had a meeting with both PRT and Pittsburgh Public Schools earlier in the fall. I notified them that this would be on the agenda. If the board does approve it, then we will have time to set up a meeting with PRT and with Pittsburgh Public Schools to sort of, review what we had talked about in the fall time. And our hope would be to get this up and running in the springtime while students are still here and we have an opportunity to work directly with them. And if it is successful, we'll obviously want to continue it into the fall time. And we'd rather start it now as opposed to starting in the beginning of the school year. So we think this is, and that I should just give Nick Tudelo some credit for when I was talking with him about it. He was the one that suggested, if we're going to do it, let's try to do it now. So this is why we're bringing it to you.
So,
Okay.
I was gonna say, so this will be for middle and high school, both.
That's correct.
And then the way it works now, without the program is the students that qualify for PRT passes, is it still a reimbursement from the PPS? No, they PPS is directly providing.
PPS is paying for it and providing, but what happened here is that they'll
just reimburse you.
there's going to be a way that this is invoiced, and so I believe they'll be paying PRT for their students, and we'll be paying for ours. That's one of those are the things that we'll go and talk through. But I think if we ask Tanya, this will give her a great more ability to manage this and be much more positive for her as it relates to the management of this, and that for us is a big part of this.
Yes, I would say as now there's a lot of red tape involved. Not with just ordering them monthly, but also like if students lose passes. So as it stands now, I put in a request to PPS for the order once a month, which is the 23rd of the month. And that activates them for the following month. So today is the 18th, so on Monday I'll put the order in, which would be for March. If in any time span a student loses their bus pass from March through the end of the month, they have to wait until the following month for me to be able to put in for their new bus pass. So they'll go, some of them lose it at the beginning of the month, and their parents have to do their, load a bus pass for them for the entire month. They're responsible for their transportation. The other hiccup that we run into a lot is, they will not, so right now, if we don't have a full month of school, PBS only loads the bus passes for the number of days that we are in school, which means our students that work and or are in activities with no transportation on days that we don't have school. So that's also a big issue that we run into. So next month, not really next month, in April, when we have spring break, there will be that entire week where those kids won't have a PRT bus pass to use because PBS does not pay for them to have transportation for that week.
Okay, so with the PR partner program, you'd be working directly with PRT for all of the passes.
And everybody will have a monthly pass every single month, no difference of bucks.
Yeah.
So because with that program, it's a set cost of $28 a month, which is for a monthly pass. So it's irregardless of how many days we're in school that month.
Right, and the issue with losing cards, even if they don't have a smartphone, you can directly work with them to get them.
Right, it'll be easier for me to get them a loaded bus pass again.
What do they use if they don't have one? So,
Go ahead.
They'll still have, they can use the PRT card, the physical PRT card.
So if you have a question.
What, this has been talked about every pilot, so what do you guys want to track about will be the success criteria?
I'm sorry, Zoe, can you repeat that?
I'm wondering, since this is a pilot, what would make us say yes or no? What are we going to be looking at for success criteria?
What, a couple of things. One, I think we'll be very interested in like learning, really, is this much easier for us to manage and operate? Does it allow us to have smoother, what I'll call customer service, not just customer service, particularly for students and parents. So that actually is probably the most important thing. The second thing that we're going to be looking at is trying to understand how many kids are using these passes. We're going to have to try to figure out how we're going to get that information, but how are students using these passes? Are they using them? You know, we're hearing, I'm sure not everyone's happy about riding PRT, but we are hearing a lot of positive stories about that. And so we want to try to understand, are students using this, not only to get to school, but are they using it, as Tanya said, for things like work and other things? And so trying to understand that. And then I think there are other things that we've already been sort of paying attention to, like what have we seen as it relates to attendance? Are these buses bringing our kids in a time frame that allow them to get to school on time and things of that sort, which we're already sort of monitoring. So those would be some of the things that we're thinking about initially. But if I'm being really honest, the most important thing for us is the smoother operations as it relates to, and a little bit more autonomy, quite frankly, as it relates to transportation.
Also.
Let's see that. Any any thoughts about that, Sophie?
I'm interested to start looking at the usage data, because I think, especially since this is a broader population.
Yep.
And we just also get a dollar amount on
Yep,
the
agreed.
PRT, we're paying with the payer.
Do we have to talk to them about that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna speculate that I would hope that they be able to provide some form of usage data.
This came up at the Finance and Facilities Committee. We haven't had a chance to talk to them, but we have, I've let them know we have some questions about tracking information and seeing if we can understand it.
Yeah, so I know that right now, so if somebody tells me that their card isn't working, PRT can tell me the last time that card had been swiped. But the other benefit to this too that I don't even think we even really thought about is we have a large amount of students that are within what PPS considers walking distance. So from 6th through 8th grade, anybody that is a mile and a half or less does not get a PRT pass, and for high school, it's 2 miles or less. They do not get a PRT pass. So that will, those students will now have bus passes as we move forward with this program. So where they are having issues walking to school, their parents don't want them walking to school, they can literally just get on the bus.
It'd be great to I guess we'll find out about the data and then we'll give it all a road, don't tell them yet. So we can do some things with it. Because yeah, I think that would be very interesting, and one of the questions, I guess, related to all this is that, maybe help answer some of this potentially, but are we aware of any other schools that run this?
When we met with Pittsburgh Public Schools, they said they were really interested in us doing this so they could see how it goes. This is another way where charter schools are being innovative. I think ECS led the way to create, I argue, to create the steel standards. So that, again, innovation, and here we'll see what we can show as it relates to public transport. They were honest about it.
Well, we don't know anybody else necessarily.
No,
There is no, there is nobody else.
Okay. Any other questions about this? Before we go? I'm going to read the resolution if I can find it. Here it is. Resolution 2026-03-2207, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school, that the Carter Pass program agreement be approved. The motion. Second? in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Resolution is adopted. Thank you for all your work on this. All right, so with that, we'll get past 89, which is the policies up this month. Number 10, I'll just quickly, this is really a procedural matter, as I think most folks here are probably aware. Our bylaws, board trustees are eligible to serve 2 terms of 3 years apiece. And so after an initial term of 3 years, they continue on, assuming board members are retained. We're a little bit negligent in kind of confirming that retention for a couple of board members, including me. So this is just a procedural vote to confirm the retention of Randy Forbes and me, that we're continuing on to our second term. We're already a little bit into the second term, but this just confirms that. And now, of course, if you have to, the board does not have to adopt this resolution, and that would certainly get me home a lot sooner. If you choose not to, so I will modify something. Yeah, if there are any questions, talk about it, but otherwise, Resolution 2026-02-2208, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the school that Board Trustees Brandon Forbes and Stan allotment shall each be deemed to contain for a second board term, retroactive to the expiration of their first terms. Do you have a motion? Okay. Do you have a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion passes, resolution is adopted.
Yeah. You have
Okay.
this question of saying that.
Yeah, I guess I should. I don't know how that works actually. But either way, it's going to pass. So we'll move on to number 11, reports. As far as the executive committee, just one thing that I talked about a little bit. I think with the executive committee, we talked a lot about it. Just on general governance and not so much governance, but subject to board trustees and committees and other things. I'll probably we've had a couple of people who left the board not too long ago, and we added some, added at least one person and shifted around some of the positions, and so as often happens, we have a little bit of imbalance between our committees and different imbalances in the activity of different committees. So I think even though it's not sort of beginning of a new term or whatever, I think it's a good opportunity to kind of consider shifting around the balance of those and making sure that we have, everything accounted for in terms of responsibilities. So, I'll probably send an email just to the board about this, but, if people are interested either now or in the future of being part of certain committees, taking on more leadership roles in certain committees, things like that. I just think it's important for me, but also for the executive committee who decides how to staff those committees, to understand who's interested in those. I've talked with a few people over the last few weeks about if they have interest in that, and now or in the future, but I'll probably send an email just to gauge that. And so for anybody listening or who's here, and for those who aren't here, you can certainly let them know, to let me know if there are certain things you would be interested in doing, if you would like to take if you're not in a active position as much on the board, if you have some ideas of what things you might want to do, or serve as a committee chairperson, or now or in the future again, let me know, and we'll, that is something we'll want to take into consideration. So just putting that out there. Any questions about that? That's all I have on the executive committee side of things, unless anybody else does. Governance committee, I think we have a report. The education committee, I think Jill gave me a report, which I will read. Sarah is not here. The report is that we met on Friday 13th, auspicious. We reviewed a drafted revision of the code of conduct, discussed timelines for approving the code of conduct, and the induction plan for new teachers. Provided an update on school days this year, including snow days, remote days, and flexible learning days. So, anything else to add? Anybody in the committee?
I'll just say that Mandy and Marissa have been doing, among others, have been doing great work on putting together the student code of conduct and meeting internally with folks here, we have meetings with our union leaders coming up and others. And so we look forward to bringing this to the board. And I think we're also having some initial conversations with some folks at the PCO. So we're looking forward to bringing this to the board in probably the next meeting, we think. Our hope is that it would, we could let it sit for a couple of board meetings, but we'd really like to approve it. If we need to make changes or we can do that, but we'd like to get it approved so we can get it rolling for the beginning of the 26, 27 months. It's hard to start thinking about 26, 27 school year.
And then for the code of conduct, will it cover, will it do this, follow the same process where it will be posted for public comment as well prior to?
We'll put it out at the March meeting, and from there, let it sit for a couple months.
Great.
Do we have a report from the Finance and Facilities Committee?
We can give one, there's several of us here. Essentially, everything that's in 6.2, 6.3, and 7, financial reports, payments over 500, and the quote about the partner pass we talked about extensively. We also talked a good amount about where we were at in terms of the high school and middle school project, in terms of leases. I think we talked a little bit about the negotiations. And I can't remember if we talked about anything else, but
Oh, yeah, no,
we covered most of it here.
yeah, exactly. And Michelle said that, especially in the last 4 months, a lot of our revenue numbers have cut back down because of the payments in the school rate. Or for the 2 days.
Okay. We have an ECS FT report.
Hi.
Hi.
ECSFT appreciates the administration's decision to reschedule the town hall, especially in the case of having the opportunity to prioritize joint negotiations with paraprofessionals during that time, which we are eager to continue. Unrelatedly, we surveyed staff recently about their thoughts about the new building location. We are working still on synthesizing and aggregating those responses, but I know we have heard at board meetings from parents' concerns, and we were hoping to provide some teacher feedback and some balance from the teacher side of things. And we will share that with home office and the board as soon as we sort through that.
Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. PCO, all right, well, unless there's anything else, I think we can adjourn. No? Motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second?
Thanks.
On favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Adjourn. Thanks, everybody.